right, dope.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to my first ever debate online. Um, I'm talking with a fellow who messaged me and said that they wanted to debate on the topic on, if I remember correctly, whether or not Donald Trump was fascist based on the January 6th insurrection. I got that
No,
right?
no, it doesn't. Well, I'm not concrete on a topic. I don't
Mm-hmm.
particularly, I'm not hinged on talking about one thing.
Mm-hmm.
We can talk about anything. I noticed your bio has quite a lot of
It has quite a bit.
all my fits.
All
It's
right.
quite a bit. So anything in particular is fine with me.
All right.
So I mean, I have some preferences on topics. I don't think talking about January 6th is really that valuable.
Mm-hmm.
It's just my opinion, but sure.
All right. Do we want to start with Donald Trump being a fascist? Um, I think he's a fascist because he tried to overthrow democracy, or at least I think trying to overthrow democracy is a pretty fascist thing to do. You know, inciting a mob to harm standing legislatures in order to halt a legal election, as well as the fact that he's got that strongman persona. He alludes to a sort of fictional great history, make America great again, but he doesn't really point to a specific decade of what he's trying to return to,
Uh-huh.
and just a litany of things that he does. But really, the big thing for me is the hammering on the fact that the election was fraudulent, even though it has been proven to be one of the most secure elections that we've ever had. You got a response to that one?
Uh, yeah, go ahead. There's a lot to say. What makes it a secure election? Like, what is it to know that? How does someone know such a thing?
Good question. Basically, we found the least amount of fraud in this election. Both the Department of Defense and I think it was also the FBI uh, uh, proof of 20, 2020 security. Sorry, election security.
You don't need a source. I'll take what you say at face. I'm not particularly the source question mark guy.
Okay.
That's not really my forte. I don't
Okay.
think sources are necessary for 80% of everything I
Essentially,
do.
okay, then let me put it this way. There was like 60-ish, 60 plus court cases Donald Trump and the Republican Party held in trying to overturn various portions of this election. And at every individual point, all of those cases were lost, all 60 of them. So if it really was fraudulent, why didn't that go through any of the judges, some of whom were appointed by Trump? You'd think
Uh,
they'd be on his side, but 60 cases later, he gained no ground.
sure. So like I'm gonna revert back to the original question because I think that is the important one. I'm gonna go to
Mm-hmm.
what you just said. How does one know it's the most secure election? So like we are taking a fraudulent activity, one that is not documented. That is what it is by criminal nature. It's not documented. If it was documented, then it would require like a system.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no system that documents these things, right? Not people who actively document themselves doing it. That is. So what we have is a system that documents the ones that we find, right? And this is of all things, a crime, for example. We can use crime as kind of a logical parallel with this. If someone was to say, we have the lowest crime, the lowest car theft, let's say the lowest theft or pocket thieves uh, in the last 10 years, right? Well, what is it required to know such a thing? Well, it requires that we document it. But what are we actually documenting? Well, we're documenting all individuals who get caught, or all individuals who, let's say, potentially lose things out of their pocket, and then assume that it's theft, right? Like that is the source of these, like, let's say, we'll use statistics, but we'll say claims, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I find it somewhat um, well, I just think it's a little bit of a waste of time to assume that we can trust these things. Like we are just relying. Okay, we found the least amount of it. Awesome. How much did we look for it? And do we have a process for looking at it? Like, let's say a universal one. Well, we don't, right? We can agree upon this. There's no universal audit, right? It's on a state level. Do all states audit? No, of course not. So, like, to what extent? So we have a system in which we don't look at a universal level. So we already have, like, for example, we're trying to compare a national statistic with something that we don't look for at a universal or union level, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then we are basing this assumption off of what? Self-reports? Well, that doesn't happen. So it's incidents that are particularly looked for. And then what checks them exactly? Because there's, like, the states that require, a lot of these court cases you're referring to, you have to understand, are court cases that are asking for an audit, right? Like, that is the point of these court cases, is to have an audit. That's one that was happening in Arizona, the fact that they were trying to use a court case to prove that evidence of some fraudulence was a warrant for a statewide audit. So what you're saying is that isn't it a good thing that, you know, we didn't have these statewide audits because there's a lack of evidence that requires them? And then the circular part of that is there's such a lack of evidence that requires them, why would we need a statewide audit? So I find this system to be a little bit redundant, that we're relying on, you know, this obviously circular kind of idea of, hey, there's the least amount of crime possible. Why should we investigate how much crime there is?
Okay, but in order to vote, you need like voter ID registration and such instances as like.
Do you support voter ID?
To an extent, obviously, there's been instances in history where they've used voter ID in like pretty blatantly racist ways. We've seen this in the legal system.
Do you support voter ID though?
Yeah, like a driver's license.
Do you believe that identification and registration should be required to vote?
Yeah, some stuff like instances like during the 2020 election, they were really worried that like dead people are being used to vote. But what I read on the subject is that you can cast your ballot, send it in the mail, and then you can die before the election has counted the results, and because you're dead, your death certificate would show up when they checked your name from your vote, and they would throw out your ballot because you're no longer alive.
Why would they check your name from your vote? That's an audit, is it not?
I don't know what the like specific legal term is, but
well, I mean, that would be audit, correct? So verifying that an individual is alive and actually voted. So, for example, like if I was to send you a letter and ask you, hey, whatever your name is, you voted for this person, correct? Mm-hmm. And you were to send that back to me. That's an audit, in a sense, correct?
Correct.
So do you support audits?
Yeah, to an extent. They're a pretty good safety feature.
So you support audits?
Yeah, they're a general, like, neutral thing.
Okay, so Trump is suing these states because he believes that audits are valuable things that are capable of finding fraudulent votes. Now, he just happens to believe that it's on a scale that would overturn the election. But we could both agree that audits are valuable things that are useful tools.
Yeah, I mean, he had that phone call with, what was it?
He's very fascist about requiring these audits because it kind of sounds like you're an individual who agrees with voter registration and voter identification. You see the usefulness of audits to secure elections, and yet you are kind of piggybacking on the idea that an individual who agrees with these things, that, I mean, the party of registration, for example, and the party that wants, let's say, statewide audits in areas that are particularly contested, but I support them on a universal level. I don't care how red or blue your state is. I think that your vote should be verified in some way. It's a part of democracy that should be, let's say, protected.
Well, to be clear, he wasn't just asking for audits to be like, let's just make sure. There was like phone calls that were leaked by Republican governors saying, "Hey, Trump called me saying find me 11,000 votes that would turn over that state to him," and they said, "I can't do that. That's not legal." And he said, "Well, do it anyways." And he got in trouble for that.
Like I said, that doesn't really have much pertinence in anything that I'm talking about at the moment. I think that the important thing to the question is the system that you are saying is so secure is one in which the individuals who do these actions obviously don't register themselves. So it's completely dependent on audit systems that get turned down in courts, and you're glad they get turned down in courts. Like, you are not an individual who would like to see a Trump victory. I'm not going to pretend here and sit like you're an individual who would like for Trump to have a national audit because you stated yourself that it was one of the most secure elections. So
well, the thing is, we did those audits though in what was it like Arizona and South Carolina.
You did universal audits?
Not we did
Because you didn't
statewide
get a copy, I
audits.
didn't get a copy.
Statewide audits.
No, we didn't.
Where in
Which
like
state cleaned up? Name a state.
I think it was which state was it
Which state?
that like they found like more votes for Biden. It was hilarious. Trump sued for an audit, and then they recounted, and they found more
Okay,
votes
so
more
you
votes
have
for
an
Biden.
individual. That's fine. I don't care who it swings towards. I don't think you're quite picking up on what I'm saying. We both agree that registration is necessary and a good thing. And we both agree that national audits, to some extent, is a necessary and useful tool for upholding the democracy that you so value. I'm just finding it a little bit ridiculous that the circular logic that you're having is that it is
But
the most secure election. It's so secure that verifying how secure it is absurd.
no.
That is
We can
well,
secure.
that is the ultimate
They
point,
did
because
those
because
audits, but
your original claim is that it's absolutely secure, and
in
individuals
the
like Trump that would like to see it be audited is an action that overturns these elections and not one
in
that is
the
interested in the
hang
security
on,
of
let me get a
everyone.
point in here. In the
Sure.
60 plus court cases that were held, no evidence of fraud on
Oh,
a wide
awesome.
enough scale was found.
Where is this evidence from? It is from the fact that there is absolutely no audit system. I mean, like, we can go on this circular day. There is a group of individuals that are claiming that there are more people that are committing theft, right? And this is, and basically the court systems are asking, hey, like, we'd like to like verify this. How do you know this is true? Right before we do an audit. Well, we can't prove it to you that it's true. There's no individual database in which people who commit theft log into and go, hey, by the way, I just stole a guy's wallet on 99th Street. Like, it requires that audits go through. So the fact that that there has to be a court case, like we are having a court case to determine whether or not to search for evidence for something, I think is absurd. I think that evidence should be searched for first, and that's the point of audits. Audits is to verify,
Right,
right?
but you
So
realize your
you're
position.
advocating that verification is something that should be, let's say, warranted rather than, let's say, a foundational aspect of democracy, which I think is kind of
Okay,
absurd that that verifying the results of an election is a privilege that can only be deemed to people with evidence who, let's say, are fortunate enough to find the one guy who actually, you know,
but the thing
leaves a
is,
ballot in the
Trump
ballot, right?
wasn't asking for. He wasn't being some good faith actor who's like, let's
Not
double
even.
check the security of our systems. He was
I mean,
deliberately.
that's exactly what they're
He
doing.
was
That's
claiming
exactly
that
what they're
there had
doing.
been fraud or that there was going to be fraud before the election started. He was ragging on about how mail in ballots were such a fraud, even though it was
Yeah,
shown.
some of them are deemed as unconstitutional. For example, we have cases, and like I said, this is one of those debates where I think it's not even like the individual aspects of it, like these, like I don't know, like these, you know, I don't want to say stats because they're not stats, but like these kind of like factoids are just like a useless aspect. But for example, in the Pennsylvania case, you have about 6,000 to 8,000 ballots that are. I believe it has something to do with the date not being printed on the ballot. So there's no verifiable way to determine them as to being late ballots that actually meet the deadline. And you have a case in Pennsylvania where, against the Pennsylvania Constitution and supposedly, obviously, the United States Constitution, that these ballots are ruled as unconstitutional on a state level, and they have 6,000 to 8,000 of them that are basically revoked, right? And this was getting called out way before the election. I remember talking about this way before the election, and this was one of those cases that was kind of a red flag. Where okay, we have these laws that are passing. And this is obvious, right? Before the election cycle, you see a push in most state houses to change some form of election law. Like this is a common midterm and election cycle thing that that the election laws change so that it benefits one party. We have one party in let's say Pennsylvania, for example, that are pushing for this this ridiculous bill that basically means that dates aren't put on the bill, or not sorry, aren't put on the ballots, right? And so
I'm
that
not
becomes
familiar with that bill.
unconstitutional immediately after the election. So when we say things like, "Oh, well, there's no evidence for it," or like we're throwing up red flags before it, yes, because a lot of the election laws are generally changed or supported or rejected before the election. Like, obviously, parties are interested in benefiting their own party, and making it easier or harder to vote is a beneficial task.
Okay,
So
then let me put it this way. A quote from Attorney General Bill Barr, the highest legal office in the land. He said, I quote, I made it clear that I do not agree with the idea of saying the election was stolen and putting this stuff, which I told the president, was bullshit. Former Attorney General Bill Barr testified.
Awesome.
The highest.
Government official bureaucrat says he doesn't like established party. What does this mean?
No. He was Trump's guy. He was Trump's Attorney General.
I don't care who these elites are. I think that you just have to recognize the cycle that you're putting forth, which is that an unverifiable system is, let's say, has to be like
It's
an
been
unverifiable system
verified.
that doesn't provide any evidence for itself has to be verified.
Those audits were done, and it was found that Trump lost
No, it's not.
massively.
You
But even
are
after the
blatantly lying.
fact,
You are blatantly lying to yourself if you believe audits were done on a universal level. Did you give
I'm
us
not saying universal. I'm saying in states they
so
did
done in
recounts.
particular places, and then the ones that were the ones, for example, that are tipping point states like Arizona, where the states get denied audits, those are the ones that did. So we have audits in places like, I don't know, Montana, that don't really require an audit, but key states that are contested are the ones that we don't have audits on. But it's okay to dismiss the fact that we don't have audits on them.
Well,
We
let me
have
put it
some
this
kind of
way.
audits
Let me
for
put it
some
this way.
countries.
All of the officials in charge of verifying and double checking and make sure there's no fraud in the election systems have all come out and said that the
That's
2020
awesome.
presidential election
That's awesome. How
was
do
the
they
most
verify?
secure one.
What is the verification for that?
I don't work in their office,
Well, I
but
mean, no,
all of
did
the
they send out letters? Let's see those. How about this? I want to do a little.
we're hang on. We're pulling a bit of a Mott and Bailey here, and I really want to zero in on this.
I know.
Trump said, even though Trump's closest allies were saying that the election wasn't stolen, he still hammered on the fact that the election was stolen. And in doing so, he incited an insurrection on our democracy.
We're just moving at a pace here that doesn't make any sense. Like I said, you are saying that there is a system in place that verifies these things to be true or false.
No, I'm saying that Trump was fascist because he lied in order to stay in power.
I'm focusing on a key point here. You are saying that the claims of election fraud are fraudulent. Okay, fantastic. I don't care whether or not you think they're false or not. I don't particularly have a stake in it. I'm just simply saying, what does it mean to know these things? How does one know? And you are saying, well, it's reliant on a system. It's like, well, what is a system? Well, does a system audit? No, some of them do. Okay, which ones do? I don't know which states do. There was one state that did it, and it actually had more votes for Joe Biden. That's awesome. So is there a universal audit system? No, there's not. So there's no way to collect evidence of whether or not votes are fraudulent. Well, there's these groups of people that basically they verify the election, and they said that there wasn't any fraud. Okay, how do they verify it? Do they audit it? No. Okay, so how are they verifying? So, like, let me ask you an example. If someone in an office, let's say 300 miles away from you, because you live in, I'm not going to dox you, but you live, so say 300 miles away from you, and they say, yeah, this person, they voted for blank. And someone, let's say, asks them, like, on the news, who did this guy vote for? Yeah, they voted for blank. How do you verify that? Like, what is it? Like, what does it even mean? Like, how does one verify this? Well, it requires that whatever individual, is counting these things, audits it. Like, they send you a letter, and then you verified it. Like, it is your responsibility to verify it in some sense. Like, they can't verify to you.
They can also check. They can also check against national populations from the census, and they can also check to make sure no one dead is voting, and they can also check to make sure that no one who doesn't have a birth certificate has voted.
That's an audit, and they're not doing that. That's an audit. So, like, that's what an audit is. Like, if you vote, and I just accept your vote and put it in the tally system, that's not an audit. Now, if I looked at your vote, right, and before I put it into the audit system, or maybe after I put it in the audit system, which is, you can do that as well. You can make sure that elections were fraudulent or that there wasn't. But look at the elections, after the election, I put your vote in the tally and it goes in. And a month later, I send you a letter and you've been dead for 5 months. That's an audit, and your vote should be revoked. Now, if you do that enough times, then there should be some type of change. Now, we don't have systems in place that really do that. Like, that's what a universal auditing system is. And that's what I'm advocating for. But it just seems like your system of rationale is that, well, we have to trust the higher-ups that don't audit anything and basically just read your vote one time and put it into a machine. It's like, well, that's pretty absurd. And then simultaneously, you agree with me that universal auditing systems are, quotations, useful tools for ensuring democracy. So
Arizona, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Texas. I'm looking to see, how many audits, and I'm seeing.
It doesn't. Like I said, even if 40, like I said, this is one of those things where I say stats don't matter. I don't care about stats. Even if 49 states did it, the fact that there is a sum of people in this country in which it is capable and possible that elections can be fraudulent is absurd, right? And but the fact is, you would disagree with making, like, if there was a singular state that was always tipsy, let's say 50-50. And they came out and they said, yeah, well, this party won. And you go, well, Can we get an audit? Well, where's the evidence of the fraudulent votes? Oh, well, you have to do an audit to get that. Well, you don't. There's no reason to do it. Like, why we should do it? See, this is the absurdities. You've created a cyclical. You've created a. What the fuck is that in the sky? Whoa.
A lot of individual states that were heavily contested.
I'm having like an alien moment. One sec, bro.
All right.
Sorry, bro. One sec.
No, it's all right. It's all right.
One sec.
But yeah, no. We're looking here. Just Arizona, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Texas, all over where these these states were contested. They were audited. The audits were happening. And they lost 60 plus court cases because they couldn't prove that any fraud was happening. But this guy's doing a bit of a Mott and Bailey. He's out of the call right now, so I'm talking, just filling time. He's doing a bit of a Mott and Bailey. We originally started on, is Donald Trump a fascist because he lied about the election and started an insurrection on the big lie. And this guy's harping on not the big lie, not on Donald Trump, but on the election auditing system. He's digging into a detail that implies more. He's holding a position pretty well. He's well spoken. I really like him. But it's implying a lot more. It's implying he's moving to a more defensible argument. Hi, you back?
You're not gonna fucking believe me, but like on like my left and right testicle, this huge ball of fire just came out of the freaking sky.
Damn.
Flew in front of me for 30 freaking seconds and then disappeared.
Damn. That is wild. Okay. I'm gonna make my counter argument here.
Sure, go ahead.
So, in Arizona, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Texas, a bunch of states, these audits happened on a state level in individual states where they were most heavily contested. And in 60 plus court cases, they weren't able to find enough evidence to overturn the results of the election. They just couldn't.
I don't believe an audit happened in Arizona. Now, I may be wrong, maybe very recently.
Arizona's highly controversial election audit wrapped up Friday, and the GOP-backed company conducting it announced in the investigation it actually increased President Joe Biden's margin of victory. But Republicans in multiple other states have already underway in other probes that could sow new doubts in the presidential vote count.
Sure.
I got it up on screen. I just realized you can't see that, can you?
No, it's I'm not like I said, I don't care about stats. Like the fact that like people talk about stats is like boring.
Okay, well, I'll drop the link in journal just in case.
Sure,
I know. You want to look at it.
Sure, I'll take your word for it. I'm not
Okay.
someone who cares.
All right. But my main point is, even though that Attorney General Bill Barr and the people close to Trump and 60 court cases later all said that the election wasn't stolen and that Donald Trump had lawfully lost, he still continued to push the big lie about election fraud. And in doing so, he fostered a crowd that eventually resulted in the insurrection on January 6th.
Awesome.
And I don't know if you've been seeing the hearings, but they're pretty damning. Well, they're a bit dry, but that's politics for you.
They switched to like golf on like CBS, like the last part of it. It was particularly boring.
Oh,
it's
good
quite
Lord!
Interesting that we have record level inflation, and the Democrats are spending time and money trying to indict someone who probably isn't going to run for president in 2024.
He said he's going to run.
That's what the party does, so I don't care.
He said he's going to run, but even if he wasn't going to run, it's still important to make sure that people.
If it was really important, I think people would be watching it, right?
Well, 20 million people watched the first one. I don't know about the second one,
Why?
but
It's because they leave it on the dentist. Of course. When I go to campus, sometimes I see it in the hallways. They leave CNN on too.
When I'm getting my teeth cleaned, I like to think that our democracy is being cleaned as well. All right, it's a parallel there. It's poetic.
20 million people out of like 340 million people turn on a TV and watch something, and like over 10 million of those are dentist offices and
the popularity of something does not dictate its importance. I think it's really...
I thought you literally just said that people found it important. Like, yes.
People do find it important.
Who is they? Like the 10 people that are like you that sit on a stream and get mad at Trump still, or like the dentist office? Because I really don't think it's as important as like
January 6th.
I think I've read something like 13% of people's savings are getting wiped out this year. And there's
You're pivoting. You're pivoting.
Wait, no, there's no pivot. You said it's important. I'm just saying, is it really as important as these things? It's not a pivot. It's a question. So, like,
but it's really convenient for your position that when I start harping on a hard to defend point that the January 6th was an insurrection against our democracy, and then you start talking about savings.
Like the idea that overthrowing democracy is an inherently fascist ideal is ridiculous. It's from I think it's kind of like you have like a trilinear perspective on politics. Like, now I understand like there is a trilinear system of belief between liberalism and socialism, and obviously ideals of third positionalism. But I just find it a little bit absurd that like the idea of overruling democracy in a system is somehow inherently fascist. I think that's just a dog whistle for someone who thinks that everything that is against the system is right-leaning. But sure, right? And then
I won't say that everything's against the system is right-leaning, but I think Trump certainly has...
When your main contention is things that are against democracy are inherently fascist.
I think trying to overthrow a democracy to stay in power despite... to stop the lawful transfer of power... to stay in power while invoking like
is lawful is based off of a system that I don't think works. I think that's the critique. I don't think there's any overthrow. I think it's quite absurd to say that any of the rednecks or hillbillies or hicks that are at the January 6th event were actually under the impression that what they were going to do was overthrow the election. You look at these videos where people go in the office of Nancy Pelosi and go, you're fired. I'm almost positive those people are not under the impression, yes, my actions will literally overthrow the government today.
Are you aware of the actions of the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers? They brought body armor. They brought zip
Yes, those people were body armor
groups. They brought body armor. They brought gallows. They brought zip tie handcuffs.
Awesome. Individual crazy people bring crazy things. I'm like, listen. I understand that you might find one or two individuals.
They were not one or two. They were hundreds. Hundreds of them showed up. There were 300 Proud Boys.
Let's be very clear. The hundreds that showed up are not individual. Like, you look at these videos. The 32-year-old white woman with blonde hair who weighs like I don't know, like 120 pounds and is 5'2" is probably not under the impression that their actions are going to overthrow the system. Like, well, it's like this isn't like some mass like.
They certainly believed they were going to try. All you have to do is listen to their testimony.
They were going to try. Miss Karen from fucking Wyoming, who drove there to see President Trump and went with her husband like hand in hand to the White House to yell, "All lives matter." They're under the impression they're going to overthrow the system. Really? Like, really?
Not just them, but also the hundreds of Proud Boys that were there.
The hundreds. Yes, the hundreds of like the Trumps, and then there's a couple guys with fucking helmets on that are brain dead. I don't know why we're gonna sit here and like actually pretend like you seriously believe that all those people were actually under the impression that they were going to overthrow the system. They went in there to fuck things up, and that was like their whole goal. They're just a bunch of like savage morons, right? We can both agree. And they went in there to make a mess, because that's what stupid people do. Stupid people go places and make messes out of things they don't understand. So
I do agree that they were quite stupid, but the crowd was also shouting, "Hang Mike Pence! Hang Mike Pence!" And people close to Trump reported that he said that he thought Mike Pence deserved it. We saw that in the testimony during the hearings.
Austin, that's not inherently fascist, nor is it evidence that they're overthrowing the system.
That is evidence that they are inherently anti-democratic, which I think is equally as bad.
They're really so Mike Pence is a fucking Democrat? Let's actually
not the political party Democrat. I mean the political system, democracy.
No, let's just take a second to think about what you just said. They are anti-democratic. People who want to kill the party of fascists, in your opinion, are anti-democratic. So if I was to hang Mike Pence, I'm doing an anti-democratic action. However, if I asked you 20 minutes earlier, which I sadly didn't, but if I asked you 20 minutes earlier, if you thought that Mike Pence was in any form of way a supporter of democracy, you'd probably answer a very, very staunch no, right? So individuals
Actually, to give him credit, he refused to try and overthrow democracy. He said,
awesome. So Mike Pence isn't a fascist.
barely.
Okay, exactly. So this is ridiculous. The idea that you can be a supporter of democracy and simultaneously fascist is absurd. And that's not because being anti-democracy is fascist, but it's because being fascist, in a sense, is having to be anti-democracy.
You know, there are actual 14 points of fascism. There's the nationalism, disdain for human rights, the identification of enemies as a unifying class, supremacy of the military.
Isn't this French guy who wrote that pamphlet on how to identify this, and this guy was pretty much just a fascist?
Umberto Eco? Well, there's been a lot of people who've written on fascism since the 1920s, 1930s.
I've read it too. It's not very astounding, and I don't really care for the dog whistles of calling things fascist. Like, guess what? Not everyone who hates democracy is a fascist. Like, most people can agree democracy is cringe and lame. Like, I don't know what to tell you. But, when we get to the point where you start calling Mike Pence a defender of democracy and that killing him is fascist is kind of interesting. And then simultaneously believing that the people you see in those videos in any sort of way are these radical extremists who actually believe that
they were radical extremists there. That's who showed up.
They were radical extremists with the impression that what they were going to do was going to overthrow democracy.
Yes, that's what they were doing.
Yeah, I'm glad you could read minds, because I honestly don't believe that to be true.
That and their history and their...
I don't believe any form of empiricism can believe that to be true.
You don't think any form of empiricism could convince you that they were there to try and overthrow democracy?
Yeah, I know. I don't believe any form of empiricism or fucking perceptualism can gather enough information for you to look at a TV screen, look at a 5'2" white woman holding hands with her husband with a MAGA hat on, and yell something obscene outside of the White House.
Let me read you two things then real quick. Quote, January 6th was the culmination of an attempted coup, Chairman Bernie Thompson, a Democrat from Mississippi, said in his opening statement. A brazen attempt, as one writer put it, shortly after January 6th, to, quote, overthrow the government.
A Democrat says that a different party instigated a coup. That's awesome.
There are Democrats and Republicans.
That's cool. Biased politician man says bad thing about other politicians.
Okay, let me quote you a Republican then. President Trump, quote, summoned the mob, assembled the mob, and lit the flame of this attack. That's from Liz Cheney. The committee has tried for months to keep a close hold on what it was learning from the interviews of nearly 1,000 people, including the president's daughter, Ivanka Trump, and son-in-law, Jared Kushner, and has accumulated more than 140,000 documents.
That's awesome.
They have people as close to him as...
Trumper says anti-Trump thing. I am amazed. Like I said, I don't.
It seems to me that you're dictating what you believe, not on what is.
You're using these elite sources of individuals who weren't in the crowd to actually give the intent of people who were there.
These people who are close.
From any individual that's a politician elite that isn't actually a member of the crowd, actually saying their intent is going to.
They quoted a member of the crowd. I already did that. As one writer put it, shortly after January 6th, to quote, overthrow the government. They have interviews with from 1,000 people who were there, both the rioters who they've detained and people who worked at, from the Capitol police officers to half a dozen people who worked in the White House. They've got people up to Bill Barr and Ivanka Trump who were close to Trump the day of the attack. And they all say, this was a planned thing. This is what he was trying to do. This is what he was attempting.
Overthrow the system.
Yes.
Yeah, I have.
That's what the hearings are about right now. And day one, they said they've dropped enough evidence that the DOJ could criminally indict Donald Trump over his actions.
Awesome.
This was statistic to error.
A bureaucratic system with unelected officials wishes to crack down on, I don't know, politician guy. I don't see the point.
I mean, I made a video not a few days ago. The 140 7 Republicans who voted not to certify the results of the election, I think they should be jailed for sedition as well.
Why?
They're anti-democratic. A democratic system cannot survive anti-democracy.
And that's not a crime. That's not a crime. How do you arrest people for like not a crime?
It's sedition. Sedition is a crime.
It's a crime to use your vote to say the opposite thing. It's like a yes or no vote. So you're basically saying it's illegal to vote no. Like, awesome. Like, what a democratic system. We live in a system where people like you call for the arrest of individuals who vote in a, like, dichotomous way.
Here we go.
Yeah.
Sedition is a serious felony punishable by fines up to 20 years in prison and refers to an act of inciting a revolt or violence against lawful authorities with the goal of destroying or overthrowing it. That right there.
They voted that they, wait, what did they vote on exactly?
They voted to not certify the results of the election. They voted no on democracy.
Yeah, no, good. That's awesome. That's perfect. Yes. You should not certify things that aren't audited. That's like verifying things that you haven't verified. Yeah, I 100%. That's not
60
fast.
court cases, my friend. 60 lost court cases.
The absurdity of that's awesome. The absurdity of this is that I could literally tell you, we could both agree that audits are valuable, useful tools, and that
And audits were done all over the country.
That's awesome. There wasn't a national audit, bro. And you know what? A lot of states turned them down. And it's not about whether or not it certifies the variable. It's not about whether or not it verifies one party won or not. It just verifies votes. That's the most important aspect. Is that the I mean, for you, for example, I don't agree with this.
Okay, then let's run this down. Even if a national audit was done, we know from the local audits that were done that Biden won by over 10 million votes.
How does one know?
Because everywhere that it was contested or questioned, they did audits, and the election security.
No, they didn't. It's contested. No, listen. How about this? Let's play a fun game. I contest the election results in Florida. Did they have an audit?
Florida have an audit? I'm pretty sure they did.
Have an audit. This is absurd. The idea that what is like how does one even make this claim? How do you make the claim that all forms of contest that have been resolved? That's just absurd. No, of course not. Obviously, not all forms of contention have been resolved. That would require that there was a national universal audit. That would require, if I said, for example, if I contested, no, I don't believe that everyone had their vote audited, and I think it's important that we do. Tell me.
Ron DeSantis is the one who rejected the review. Governor Ron DeSantis, the Republican, a Trump guy.
Yeah, I know. I understand, and why? Because Ron DeSantis said that it was the most secure election in history. I'm not a partisan person. I'm not gonna sit here and be we should.
No, but I find it really, really telling that you're we need an audit. Well, I'm okay, audits happened. Well, no, that's not enough audits. I'm here's some more audits.
Yes. What do you mean? Here's some more audits. I'm calling for a universal audit. It's like if I said, for example, I'm for universal health care, and you kept saying, well, we have Medicare. And I was no, we need more. We have Medicaid. It's no, I am asking that we verify election results. I don't care if some town in the middle of effing fucking Arizona has an audit. I'm calling for a system, a systematic auditing system that verifies what you've defined as the most important aspect of society.
Okay, then let's dig into the thing I really want to talk about. Do you think Donald Trump is anti-democratic?
No.
Why?
Because I don't believe that any of the evidence you've provided is substitute. I don't think that asking for an audit system is undemocratic. I don't believe that believing you lost the election or believing that you won the election is undemocratic. I think it's actually quite the opposite. An individual can believe that you won the election without necessarily believing that democracy is bad. You can test the results of the system, not necessarily the system itself. Democracy is a system in order to make decisions. One can contest the decision it makes on a moral level. You can say that it's wrong to have made this decision. And it's also likely to say that I don't believe people actually made this decision without necessarily, let's say, contesting the system itself. I think it's absurd to say that this is it's not even a linear thought. You can't even derive this. It's more of a, well, I'd say it's a straw man, but I don't even think it's that. I think it's more of a conflation to believe that rejecting the results of a system is synonymous with rejecting the system itself.
Everyone
I don't think what you're
everyone close to Trump and the highest legal offices in the land said that the
Awesome.
election wasn't stolen, and he continued
Awesome.
to
And
lie
what do they use to- what do they use-
anyways.
What do they use to verify this? They use a system that only audits particular parts, in which other parts of
My
it-
guy.
This is
Both Trump's team and the Democrats, a bipartisan team, all said the election wasn't stolen, and he
Well, except for
continued
the
to say that it
145.
was
Except for-
anyways.
They both these parties agreed, except for the 147 that don't agree, that you believe should be arrested for voting no. So I mean, like
They voted
so,
not to certify the election, but people as high as
an
Bill
individual
Barr.
had the power that you wish you had, you would definitely ensure that it was bipartisan, because any individual who said otherwise would immediately get arrested for voting in a dichotomous fashion in a system that allows for it. Which actually kind of stuns me that you're such a staunch advocate for democracy, but people who vote no on something democratically, which is what the House is for, it's a representative democracy in a sense. So
It's the tolerant. What you're bringing up is the tolerance of paradox. The paradox of tolerance. If you want to have a functioning democracy, you cannot tolerate anti-democratic sentiment within that democracy, because anti-democratic forces need to only win once, and then the democracy's over. It's gone. It's donezo.
This is under the assumption that democracy is a foundational principle that has to be absolute. And this is absurd, because what is the decision for this? What is the basis for this? There is no basis for this, is there? The basis for this is that it's democratically decided. The basis that democracy is a foundational principle is a democratically decided principle that we have decided to make quotation concrete. Right? And the absurdity of this is that individuals vote against this, that this might not be a foundational system, one that is unverifiable, maybe not a system that is correct in some fashion, that those people need to be arrested. That is like indoctrination to its finest extent, that you blatantly accept that there's a foundational principle, questioning it as a crime, and then why is that a foundational principle is a circular.
Oh, hang on. Hey.
Because it decided so. I mean, how absurd. The system decided that it is essential, so therefore protecting the system is essential. Anyone who goes against the system is non-essential.
Democracy is good. Not democracy is bad. I'm making it real simple. Why? Because democracy gives the maximum amount of power to the people.
Why?
That's how democracy works.
That good? Where is the prescription there?
Okay, so now you're arguing against democracy.
What is just make a prescription. What is it about democracy that is morally good? And you said why? You said because it gives people the decision. Why is that make it morally good? That's not an answer of why it's morally good. That's just what it does. So that does, for example, that does not ensure that everything that is decided is morally good. Correct. So obviously
democracy is the system by which it affords the people within it the most amount of autonomy and control over their system of government.
Whoa. No, wait. Democracy is a system that let's say establishes the most amount of autonomy. So democracy is incapable of removing this autonomy. This is not true, obviously. But you said this is autonomy over a system. I don't understand how this can be true. How can someone be autonomous but also not be capable of changing the system that makes decisions for them? That isn't possible. That's not an aspect of autonomy. If I told you there was a system so foundational that you're incapable of changing it, and then I said it's possible to have a system.
Democracy is the system that is most capable of change. It just cannot tolerate anti-democratic sentiment.
What is the moral difference between a system that is decided upon that cannot ever be changed? So if people democratically voted for a system that can never be changed, what is the difference between that and a system that you define so essential that it is foundational and cannot be changed ever? What is the difference to this? If you have a system that is voted upon that can never be changed, and then you simultaneously have a system that is so foundational.
I never said that it couldn't be changed. Democracy changes all the time. It changes every election cycle.
It should be a crime to change it. So you believe
but
the system is
yes,
so foundational
if I came across someone who's like, we should vote in the monarchy because I want a monarchy back, I'd say no. Monarchies are cringe. We're not having a monarchy.
You're deflecting. No, this is a deflection. What is the moral difference between a system that is so foundational that it cannot be changed by definition and a system that is voted upon that does not allow for change?
I'm not saying democracy can't be changed. It changes all the time. It has to be protected from anti-democratic sentiment.
That is not the question. Anyone listening understands the question. What is the difference between a system that it is criminal to change, and a system that is voted upon that allows for people not to change it anymore. What is the difference? So if I voted for a system that takes away my autonomy versus a system in which I have no autonomy to change it, what is the moral difference between them? Because one is a democratic decision in a sense. Like if individuals autonomously voted for a system that took more power from the sovereign, right, and directed it towards, let's say, a state, and then you have a system that doesn't allow any individual any autonomy, no matter the group, no matter how big the group is, to change the system because it is so foundational that we are stuck under this system. How is it
Wait,
morally
individuals don't have like ultimate control over democracy. You have to convince the majority.
I just said this, but you said, okay, so if a majority of individuals voted against democracy, you would support to remove it, correct?
No.
Okay, fantastic. So what you just said is null and void. It has nothing to do with whether or not there's a majority. So I'll revolve back to my question. What is the difference between a system that is so foundational that you cannot vote to change it, and a system in which people vote for it and then do not allow them to vote anymore for it? What is the moral difference between them? Because it just seems like one follows a principle that you agree with more and the other one doesn't, that there is a system that cannot be changed. It would seem like something you wouldn't support. And then there's a system that is voted upon by a majority, let's say, or a super majority. I don't really care what standards you have on democracy. It doesn't really particularly matter. But you have a system that cannot be changed because it is so foundational that no amount of autonomy over any amount of percentage.
Democracy is morally superior to every other form of governance.
Why?
Because it
Why?
doesn't
Why?
because it doesn't concentrate power into the hands of the few. It maximizes.
Why is that? Why is that moral? If people voted for that, why is that immoral?
Except for people don't vote for anti-democratic systems.
If they did that, yes, people did, which is why you want them arrested. So let's be frank. If
The minority voted for that because they're anti-democratic.
That's awesome. If a majority of people, this is like one of those like terrible arguments where it's like, hey, if people voted for this, would you agree with it? Well, people aren't going to vote for that. It's like, no, that's not the question. It's like obviously a logical parallel.
No, let me put it this way. If people voted to legalize murder, it would still be bad to legalize murder. Why? Because murder is bad.
Awesome. Okay, where does it? I 100% agree with you. We're on the same page. The issue is that you believe that somehow democracy is a foundational moral good, and yet
yes,
you're not really telling me we're getting this other system of morality. And so I would agree with you.
It's an axiomatic belief. You've dug down to bedrock, my dude. It goes as deep as.
You haven't made a single prescription. We haven't even scraped the surface. You haven't made any prescription whatsoever. I'm just simply saying this. There is a system that you believe to be morally good. Why is it morally good? Because people are capable of voting for things. Well, not all things, because some things that people can vote for are bad. Okay, so fantastic. So
it's the paradox of tolerance. You know.
No, this is okay. This is awesome. I don't care what the paradox is. This is as simple as it is. You like actually it's not even the paradox of tolerance because what I said like 10 seconds ago, yes, was. But my question about the like which system is more moral really isn't. Like you have defined the system as being moral. It is so moral that no amount of autonomy can change it. But the system is moral because it gives people autonomy.
Let me put it to you this way. I think murder should be illegal. Even if a small minority of people want murder to be legal, I think it is fair to stop people from making it legal. Hang on, let me finish.
Okay, you're right. Go ahead.
Even if a small minority of people want to make murder legal again, we should stop them. Even if a majority of people wanted to make murder legal, we should stop them because murder is harmful. Anti-democratic systems like fascism or the monarchy are harmful. Democracy is the least harmful form of governance. Therefore, to protect it, we must criminalize those elements that endanger it the most.
What prescriptions does democracy make that makes it more moral, or quotations, less harmful than another system? Democracy is a system in which you make decisions. It is not one, like, democracy doesn't come with attachments. Like, what I mean by that is, when you enact democracy, there isn't a group or list of specific policies that immediately get enacted when you accept democracy. So, for example, if democracy just randomly appeared in a random country, it's not as if that country becomes more moral. Like, they've just enacted a system that allows them to make moral decisions, right? Now, you could argue that democracy is a moral system of government, right? But when you say, for example, this government is harmful and this one is not, how so? Like for example, legalizing murder or murdering people isn't an aspect of democracy, nor is it an aspect of fascism or socialism or monarchism or like anarchism, right? Like none of those policies are attached to any of these ideas of like governance, right? Or autonomy, I guess. Since, for example, like obviously anarchism would be more relatable to governance or sorry, autonomy, but like none of these things are attached to it. So when you say a system is better for more,
I was using
is that?
the murder thing as an example of
Was
a
what?
system.
Was murder
No,
still
no,
under
because
that?
when I brought up democracy as a good thing, you said, what makes democracy good? And what makes it so foundational that no amount of autonomy can override it? And my answer to that is murder is bad, and no amount of personal autonomy can override the fact that murder is bad, and that we should
That's
prevent,
awesome.
as a society, murder.
You can achieve this.
This is
conclusion
rule
between-
utilitarian basics.
That's awesome. Utilitarianism is lame. Anyways,
That's a nice opinion.
No, it's not really an opinion. It's lame. I don't care what freaking Mill said about utilitarianism. It's cringe and bad, and he can't warrant his claims. So sorry.
Mhm.
Anyways, yeah, no. Like I said, there's no policies that are attached to like any system of government per se. Like there are some forms of governance that might be like this is. I mean, obviously there's systems of government, so like there are like ideals attached, like how government should perform, right? How decisions can be made, but there's no moral prescriptions that are really made with them. So like murder being bad is an independent claim. Like this is an independent prescription that we can both agree upon. Like this doesn't stop being
Because murder is bad because it violates someone's autonomy permanently.
That's awesome. No, we're not disagreeing on this. Like this is not a disagreement we're having. No one, not, like the idea that I'm vouching that murder is good is absurd. That is
No, that's not what I'm arguing.
Okay, good.
But
So
you seem to have trouble
wait,
understanding what makes democracy
Murder
good.
is bad. Then let's put it like this: if you agree that I'm not advocating for that, you don't have to tell me why it's bad. We understand why murder is
I'm
bad.
laying the
I'm
groundwork
just
for my
simply
next
saying- I'm
argument.
just simply saying, for example, when you say this system of government is good because it doesn't allow for this, it's like no, it does. Well, people wouldn't. Like it's still wrong regardless of that. That's awesome. Any system of government can come to this conclusion. It's not like people enact fascism and like everyone goes, yeah, killing people's good.
No.
Like no, it's not
I'm
like socialism,
pointing
people are
out-
like, yeah, killing
I'm
people is
fleshing out the example of murder because it lays the groundwork for my next argument, which is
Okay, go ahead.
democracy is
I want-
good because it maximizes people's personal autonomy and
Exactly.
minimizes
I wanna change
the
that.
harmful
How is that
autonomy.
maximizing? How is it maximizing? I see this is let's go back to the
When
same
when
question.
people participate
How
in a
can
democracy,
this
they have the
system-
most chance to change their democracy over any other type of governance. You don't get
Any
your
system-
average
how can
citizen
any-
cannot vote for bills or
No.
legislation
Come
in
on.
fascism
Come on.
or a monarchy.
That's awesome. Come on now. Let's that has nothing to do with what I'm saying. Like the absurdity is that you are saying the only way to maximize autonomy is to establish a system that no level of autonomy can change. That
Yeah, that's the tolerance paradox. Again,
that's not the tolerance paradox.
we keep
It's
running
the
back to
tolerance-
this.
It's literally not the tolerance
To have-
paradox.
To have a system that maximizes the safety.
Don't use terms you don't understand. Like I understand you've like read like maybe like a couple Reddit like clicks, but like that is not the tolerance of paradox. Tolerance of paradox is that we have to accept that if democracy is the only principle in which we make decisions, that there's no outside morality that dictates whether or not some democratic decisions can be made, then we have to understand that systems like democracy can allow for things that we don't agree with, and that it becomes let's say it becomes moral in this sense because we have to tolerate them because it's relative, right? That is the tolerance paradox. What I am saying is not the tolerance paradox. The critique that I am giving you is this: you were saying that democracy maximizes autonomy so much so that in order to like keep this alive, that we have to prevent people from being autonomous and allowing them to change the system. This paradox is obviously evidence because the fact that you as an individual say that people should be arrested for making a decision, right? Like for example, yes, no. We should have democratic decisions that are yes, no. Except if you say no, you should be arrested. This is the most autonomous system that will maximize its freedom.
Yes, and again, I can use the.
This is absurd. This becomes.
I can use
absolutely
the
absurd.
murder or an extension of the murder example again. To maximize the amount of everyone's ability to swing their fist around themselves, we must limit someone's ability to swing their fist at someone's nose. In order to maximize everyone's freedom, we have to curtail certain freedoms, like the freedom to murder, and that makes everyone's freedom better.
That's awesome. That has
We have to
nothing do
curtail
with
someone's
that.
freedom to steal from someone else.
That's awesome. You were just advocating that in order to maximize things that we prescribe as morally good, that we must ensure that some policy should not be made. Yes, or should
In
be
order
or
to
not be made.
maximize a democracy, we must then curtail certain aspects of that democracy,
Why
like
should we maximize
voting to end the
democracy?
democracy.
You are conflating two terms. You are arguing that democracy is a moral system, and the only reason you have for believing that is by giving these independent policies that can be prescribed without this system. You can
Bro, they are examples of a moral system. They're not policies.
You're not. No, you're not following. I'll put it a different way. You are saying that in order to maximize autonomy, we must have this system of government. I'm asking you why. Well, you go because the things that aren't autonomous are bad. Like murder is bad.
By the way, have you looked at the chat?
But you cannot. You can come to this conclusion without having democracy, right? Like any system can agree. Oh yeah, like murder is bad. Like this, like it is not incapable of citizens or groups or governments to come to this conclusion. Now, it might be harder for people to change this. So, like, let's say, for example, there's a country that says murder is good. But this is possible. Like, there might be a country that, like, a government, like a monarchy, like, let's say, like a random, like a oligarch that's like, yeah, murder's good. Right? Now, it might be more difficult for a system like this to change that. Like, it might be hard for citizens to change that. But that is not because...
Not without doing a little murder on the monarchy, yeah.
Well, no, I know you're someone who fantasizes about that because you're just an anti-establishment, anti-status quo, like leftard. But like, regardless of that, like, I don't see how you can come to these independent conclusions with like all of these things that you were prescribing to me can be independently decided upon in any system. None of these are supports of democracy. All of these are in support of a democracy that you agree with. And then this is where you keep bringing up the tolerance thing, which isn't really my argument, but if you keep bringing it up, I'm just going to have to. But regardless of that, I don't see how you can advocate for a system that is so autonomous that it cannot be changed. And your reason why it should not be changed is because it maximizes autonomy. And in what senses it does that? It does that because you say it brings out all these independent policies that we agree upon. But
No, not that it brings out the independent policies. I don't know if you're misunderstanding me here. I'm not bringing up the murder or the theft thing as examples of what democracies do. I'm bringing them up as examples of the principles of autonomy. They have nothing to do with the policies of a government.
Okay, fantastic. So you can come to all these conclusions that maximize these forms of autonomy while having a system that is more beneficial in democracy than making decisions. I don't see how you're just arguing against yourself in some sense. You're like, yes, all these decisions, and we can agree. I'm not disagreeing with you. All these decisions, all these prescriptions and moral decisions that we agree upon can be enacted in any system of government. But we need democracy. Why is that? Well, because it ensures it. What more thing does it? Like, it doesn't. Like, there's no way to ensure that unless you remove the autonomy of citizens to change this. And then and you say that's wrong. Well, why is it wrong? Well, because these decisions are morally good. So it has nothing to do with democracy that these decisions or policies are morally
My guy,
good.
when I say democracy is good, I'm not using the fact that democracy outlaws murder as an example. I was using the idea of murder as an example of what the principles of autonomy that we then apply to democracy. Everyone has the right to swing their fist as far as they want, as long as it doesn't touch my nose.
It's an aspect of democracy to agree that punching people in the face is possibly moral. Like this, this is if you believe that democracy establishes morals. But I'll use a different sentence. I apologize. Let me redact that. Like some people believe that, but I'm not going to say you do. It is possible that the system comes to this conclusion that it is okay to do so. That it should be allowed to do so. You have to.
We got 2 minutes, bud.
Say again?
I don't know if you've been looking at the chat. I have to leave soon. We got 2 minutes. Wrap up your closing arguments. I'll give you the closing arguments.
You said 2 or 5?
We'll make it 5, and I'll just be late.
Well, I'm not really debating it. This isn't. I'm not.
No, it's all right. This has been a good conversation. I obviously heavily disagree with you.
I just think that there's a general list of things to acknowledge when we make these claims. That I don't. Some people do, but I don't believe that democracy is the source of moral law. I also don't simultaneously believe that democracy is a system that necessarily maximizes autonomy. I think that this is kind of a misconception. And I think that it's very self-evident when the advocates for it believe that people should be arrested for voting against it. It doesn't seem like a very autonomous system to say that. I think it's a little bit more absurd, but it's fine. And actually, it's kind of a shame because I was really hoping that I have a different conversation. I don't particularly care for the Trump conversations. It's not really valuable. I don't particularly care about conversations on things like January 6th. I think the 20 minutes of this conversation was kind of a piss in the wind. So I mean,
well, if you want to come on another time, it was a good conversation.
I mean, listen, I'm surprisingly more interested in talking about abortion or theology.
I would love to talk abortion or theology with you. That would be a lot of fun.
Yeah, this is a lot of political garble. I don't really care about parties. So.
I focus mostly on politics, but I'll dabble in theology as well.
So we can have a little cliffhanger. Why are you an atheist?
Oh, eventually I was a dyed-in-the-wool Christian, born in a Christian household, all that. Yeah. And then I decided to go on a crusade to prove Christianity to the atheists. And I decided I would create arguments that had no logical fallacies, and that I needed to be able to prove everything I was saying. Those were my two simple rules. And then I put Christianity under the microscope. I put atheism under the microscope, and only one of them survived. And I ended up being convinced. It was terrifying, but I got used to it.
What do you mean by convinced? Convinced of what?
I not only did I not find good evidence for Christianity, but I found arguments like the argument from locality, which I made a video on a long time ago. You can find it on my channel, which basically describes that, we see religions all around the world, and each religion seems to be a product of its particular time and place with those people, and religions have a tendency to change slightly over time and over places. There's like 1,400 different sects of Christianity. There's a bunch of different sects of Islam, and, the pagans could never agree on anything. So it seemed more likely to me that religion is a product of human creativity than it is some divine ordinance.
I don't know how you came to that conclusion through this differing local beliefs in Christianity. I think it's pretty easy to say that some sects of all religions suck and are made up of idiots, and others are not. So, I mean, I would just simply say that if you were to ask a Christian or an individual who believes in Islam which sect of Christianity or Islam was correct, they would just agree with their own and say the other people are idiots.
Yeah, and I would take that as evidence.
I think that's a perfectly acceptable answer because the other people are idiots.
All right, let's not get dragged into a second debate. I do have to leave soon. It was great talking with you. Thank you for coming on. Yeah. I massively appreciate it, and we'll hopefully talk another time.
Okay. We have any? I don't know. You gonna cut the video here? Or?
I'm gonna give my closing arguments, and then that's it. So I'll bid you adieu.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. Yeah, you're right.
All right. Wow. Okay, that was a spirited and good debate. I do have to leave soon, so I'll wrap up my thoughts quickly. I get the impression he wasn't actually trying to Mott and Bailey me in trying to move away from Trump super quickly. It seemed like he was really actually genuinely intent on the arguments he was making, even if those arguments were a little bit retarded. So I feel like he kept making allusions to like how he didn't care about the data from like elites and stuff like that, from Bill Barr to the Democrats to the Department of Homeland Security. I get the feeling that I could have given him links and studies over and over showing the various ways that the election wasn't fraudulent, and he wouldn't believe because it didn't fit his specific specifications. Maybe there should be some national audit system, but also that would require all of the voting laws to be uniform and unanimous, which they are not. They're divided. They are decided by the states, so the audits have to be done at a state level. And every time those audits were done, it was confirmed that Joe Biden lawfully won the election. And then further down the line, he seemed to think that whenever I was making an argument for democracy, like he seemed to think that my examples of like the murder example of why we should curtail certain freedoms to ensure the freedom of everyone else, he seemed to think those as policy prescriptions of democracy, and not like just examples of my moral system as I was building a case upwards. I really wish I could have found a way to crack through that, because I felt like I was on the edge just multiple times. It's on the edge of like really making a tight argument. But I couldn't get him to agree with like the presuppositions. God, I'm running out of words. Before I could build further on. So I wasn't able to really land any of those arguments, even though I tried multiple times. And I look forward to seeing his arguments on theism. I don't know if he's an atheist or if he's a Christian, and if Christian, which sect. But I'm sure that'll be an interesting debate. Thank you all for coming by. I have a Patreon. I have a TikTok, which I usually post to, and the main channel. This is my first ever debate. I hope to do more. This was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed this. And I will talk to you all later. See you in the next video. Goodbye.